Welcome to the Modern Husbands podcast, where any combination of Dr. Bruce Ross, Christian Sherrill, and Brian Page host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money and the home as a team. Today, we welcome Mary Beth Ferrante, founder of Work 360. Mary Beth's focus is on positioning organizations to break the weak culture cycle that perpetuates burnout and caregiver stigma, costing organizations millions of dollars in turnover, lost productivity, and unused benefits. Today is a conversation between Brian Page and Mary Beth on the role of men in care. Enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Beth Ferrante from Work 360. I'm here with Brian Page from Modern Husbands. So excited to be here having this conversation with you. Today's actually International Day of Care, so it's very timely that we are having a conversation about men, women, caregiving, and all the things in between. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mary Beth Ferrante. I'm the founder of Work 360. Our organization partners with companies to really support caregivers and working parents in the workplace. So we provide a lot of support around parental leave guidance before, during, and after leave. We work with a lot of caregiving and women's leadership development groups on kind of providing support for caregivers. And we run a program called Fair Play at Work, which is all based on how equity in the home is so critical to advancement of men and women in the workplace. So Brian, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll dive in.
Well, thanks for having me, Mary Beth. I'm really excited. I'm Brian Page. I'm the founder of Modern Husbands, and the mission of our company is to share ideas to manage money and the home as a team. So obviously, we have a natural synergy, and I'm really thrilled to have this conversation today and talk about some of these challenges that I've faced going through them myself, and like really recognizing how much happier we are in our marriage and watching my wife thrive in her career and the joy it brings me and the joy it brings her just by putting systems in place at home that make it easier for women to be their best selves in the workforce.
And also allow men to be their best selves too,
Absolutely.
right? We want to bring it all together. So we think that this conversation is here as for you if you are feeling any of the following things. So just kind of say in your head, does this resonate with me? Like my partner and I were equals before we had kids, and then suddenly we're now in these gendered stereotype roles. That one definitely happened to me.
Okay.
Where, after about a year or two, and I was just about to have my second child, I kind of looked around and was like, how did we get here? What happened? The only way to get ahead in our careers or as a family is to go all in on just one person's career. That's one that's really common. What do you think?
Okay, so there's two there that really speak to me. So my wife and I got married very young, and we were, for perspective, we were going to get married. It was going to be like an August or September wedding, and we moved it up to February. So you can imagine why we were already engaged. And for me, I'm from a rural small town in Ohio. I looked at just what my role was as being a very traditional. I'm a provider, right? A financial provider. And so right away, we made the default decision that too many people make that is heartbreaking, to literally look at my wife's salary, which she was just out of college, so it was very modest, and compare that to the cost of childcare. And so right away, gender norms, right? And that has serious financial consequences that last throughout our lifetime. We built a calculator on our website at Modern Husbands so people could calculate the implications of that. But here's some perspective. By falling into that gender norm and her just staying home for a year, that, according to the Urban Institute, costs women on average $295,000 of lifetime compensation. That's not just her compensation, that's our compensation. And so we didn't make a long-term financial decision, yet that's my background. So yeah, I feel the pain of doing that. And then your straw poll about like having one person handle the majority of the care so you can get ahead in your career. Here's the reason why I know that that's what people think they need to do, but I have a big problem with it, is because I really love being a dad. I love it. And my wife loves being a mom. And I don't want to strip her from the humanity of being a mother. And she doesn't want to strip me of the humanity of being a father because of some sort of societal norms. So we work really hard together to make sure that we can focus on giving our kids the support that they need as a team.
Absolutely. And I think you're spot on. And we talk about it on TikTok and Instagram, right? Like girl math. And I always say that the mom math isn't mathing on this one, right? It's not working when you are applying childcare costs to just one person's salary, when in fact that childcare is enabling both of you to work. We're not even talking about just base salary, but to your point, it's total compensation. It's also bonuses. It's also the ability to get promoted and continue to grow
Yes.
your career, right? It's retirement savings. It's all of those things that are so critical to the health and financial wellness of the family. And I think one of the other really devastating statistics out there is that when women do stop working, they also get trapped in those relationships and can find themselves in abusive relationships or places they can't get out of because they don't have the financial means. So I'm 100% with you. We need to be really focused on how we can really truly not think of it as, oh, just the provider, but how can we partner in the financial well-being for our family? And that is going to look different for every family, and how
Sure.
you figure that out is okay. But I think the opportunity, and I love that you have that calculator, and we'll drop that in the notes, is to really ensure that you're thinking holistically about it and you're future thinking about it as well, right? That it's not just the cost of childcare in the moment against one person's salary, because that math just isn't mathing.
No, it's not. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that you can get trapped because, as I used to tell the girls in my class when I taught personal finance, a man is not a financial plan. And it's
Yeah,
really important that girls who do have career ambitions recognize that if they do take on careers, that it gives them the freedom to be able to be safe and secure in their relationships.
absolutely. Absolutely. And then you can really trust in yourself and trust in your partner. And that's the whole
Yep.
intent. Um, what do you share with people who are feeling like, especially men, they're seeing that their wife or their partner is really overwhelmed? They want to step up. They just don't know how. How do you help them kind of see that they can learn to be that caregiver, to be that dad that you aspire and are in your everyday life?
I think that there's a lot at play here, and we'll unpack this in the conversation, like when you talk about like mom guilt, but there's also dad guilt and husband guilt, and I'll get into that. But what I learned was, and I go back to an event that I attended years ago, and just a regular guy from a little small town. And I went to an event and walked in. There's 500 people there, and I'm one of two guys,
Yep.
and it was the COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, and then Adam Grant being interviewed by Chris Collinsworth. And I'm looking around, I'm like, how is it there's two men in a conversation with these two people? And
Yep.
that's when it occurred to me that the lean in movement, which I from what I understand originated from Sheryl Sandberg. My wife is a big believer in it. Obviously, I'm supportive, that it is so evident when you just see anecdotally something like that. And I have to say that although that sounds like it makes sense at work, that metaphorical thing to do, I don't think that works in relationships at home. The approach I took is I'm not going to lean in, I'm going to step in, because my wife really looked at what her upbringing looked like, at what her mom provided her, but her mom had a flexible career later in her life and she stayed at
Yep.
home. So she's comparing her own childhood and the relationship she had with her mom unfairly. And so
Yep.
as she's getting promoted, she's actually trying to do more around the house because she feels guilty. And I literally took me sitting down with her and telling her, stop, this is not healthy for you. I love you. We are going to sit down, come up with a system where we can have some fairness in this, where we can at least have the same amount of leisure time. So my first advice to men is to recognize that we just literally need to step in and say, we need to have a real conversation here because I'm here for you. I'm your teammate. Let's revisit what it looks like in our home.
I love that. And I think to your point, it's using the systems to be able to really create equity and fairness in your home. And again, that looks different in every household, but
Right.
it's the recognition that things need to change. And we want to find that equal leisure time and be able to make sure that we have time to care for ourselves, to care for our relationships, to, have friendships, to be able to go after what's important to us and makes us us. And, very well that here at Work 360, we're big believers in the fair play system. And that's
Mhm.
what we utilize it and teach. But I think what's really important about that is what you said about comparing yourself to how you grew up. And one of the things that we really unpack in our parental leave program is looking at what are your expectations? How did you grow up? How do you think that you want to show up as a parent? How did your partner grow up? How did they experience kind of their parents in their world? And how do you also expect each other to show up?
Right.
Having those conversations early can really help set the stage to have more equity in that relationship, to have more fairness, and to say, you know what, we might be doing it differently than how we grew up, and that's okay, but we're being thoughtful and strategic about it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So share with me really quickly how you define a modern husband.
I just believe that modern husbands see their role as providers as all encompassing. So not just someone who's a financial provider or capable of being a financial provider, but can provide their spouses with the social and emotional support they need. Because a lot of women like my wife, they have tough careers. They need it when they get home. They can provide the kind of teamwork at home where the division of labor is equitable, where most importantly, that, and this is why I love the fair play system, there's an equal distribution of the mental load.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my mind around what it would be like for an executive woman to have the mental load of running a big arm of a company and then coming home to the mental load of managing that as well. There's just not enough space. There's not enough time. It's unfair, and it's a recipe for being like really unhappy in your marriage and stressed out all the time. So a modern husband recognizes that there needs to be an equal division of the mental load of let me rephrase that. There needs to be a division of the mental load that leads to the same amount of leisure time, right?
Yeah.
And how that's distributed really depends on the couple. Like for me, I
Yeah.
intentionally decided to do what I'm doing to provide my family with what was needed at home. So we look at it as I'm now the gardener in the relationship and she's the rose. So everything that I'm trying to do here is to nourish the environment at home so she can blossom in her career. And it hasn't always been that way, but for us it makes it a lot easier for my wife to feel the relief to be able to know that she can really focus on being her best self at work.
Absolutely. And I think you hit it on the, like, how do you provide holistically, right? How do you look at this as not just about financial, but about really showing up and being a part of your family? And you mentioned earlier that you love being a dad, and I think
Yeah.
an amazing thing, and what we see from a lot of men now, right? That they want to be present, they want to
Yep.
be involved, they want to show up for their kids, but they're still feeling like they can't, or they're not taking their leave, or they're feeling held back from really stepping into that caregiver role. Like, what do you think is keeping them from really being able to step in, to your point?
Well, I had David Smith on our Modern Husbands podcast a while back, and he brought up some really interesting points that are data driven, and that unfortunately, even in companies where paid paternity leave is an option, men
Yeah.
don't necessarily take it because management is not like parenting or not. Let's call it parenting out loud. They're not like
Yeah.
making it clear, like, "Hey, I'm leaving to take my kid to the doctor's office," and yeah, I'm a man that's actually doing that.
Yep.
Because I can tell you as someone who does it, the receptionist is like, what are you doing here? Or like the understanding that as a company, we're going to support each other when we go through this. And I think that's like a big part of it because men, it goes into like dad guilt or husband guilt. Like
Yeah.
we are told you must be the financial provider. So it is terrifying to think that a decision could be made that could lead to losing your job because in so many instances, money and masculinity are married. And so I believe it can be tougher on men for that very reason. So for me, I think it's really important, if you have the ability to choose the right culture in a corporation, to really seek that out, a culture that looks at a full work-life balance holistically, irrespective of gender.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting how you said that there's more pressure on the financial aspect. I think, the difference, what we see in our parental leave program is that women, especially if they are pregnant, they have to take leave. It's not an option not to, right?
Right.
Need to recover. And
Yeah.
there is that assumption that they will. And so I think it is less pressure about even should I take leave? That's
Yeah.
already a given, right? Yes. Should I? Yes, I should. I need that time to recover. How much I take, how long I take, those are all still really big questions. And I think a lot of women do struggle with, is this going to impact my career? Am I going to get mommy tracked? Am I going to get pushed off?
Mm,
But I think what we're seeing for men is they're having a lot of those same feelings, but maybe to your point, even more intensely around,
yeah.
oh, I could get derailed in my career, and that's my role. That's what I'm expected to do here.
Hmm.
And, I don't want to gamble with that, right?
Yeah.
It's really important when we talk about this stuff to think about the culture and the manager piece. Our parental leave program has a manager component exactly for that reason,
Yeah.
because we want leaders to feel comfortable parenting out loud, to be vocal about it, to also really create that culture for their own teams so that men feel like they can step into care and take that time off.
As a Modern Husbands podcast listener, you recognize the importance of evidence-based advice from leading national experts for your marriage. That's why we know you will love our marriage toolkit. Nearly 50 national experts came together to provide bite-sized advice to manage the toughest topics couples face in managing money in the home as a team. Go to modernhusbands.com for your free preview of our marriage toolkit to start, strengthen, or rebuild your marriage. Once again, that's modernhusbands.com to sign up for your free preview of our marriage toolkit. Now back to the show.
What do you think are reasons, or what do you think modern husbands really wish that their wives or partners understood about them?
The husband guilt or the dad guilt of, in some cases, not being the breadwinner, and the overwhelming societal pressures of being a financial provider. Because what ends up happening is that, yes, women are doing more at home still. We know all of that data, right? But I'm speaking of a guy and myself that worked almost 80 hours a week for 15 years, who had a bleeding ulcer. Like, I had so much fear and stress around making sure that I was doing my job, providing for my family financially. And if there's one piece of advice that I could give executive women, it's to sit down with their husbands and say, babe, we make good money and I make good money. It's not your job to be the financial provider. That is great. That's one of the wonderful aspects of our marriage. What we need to be happy is you providing in other ways too, to
Yeah.
make men feel like that we've been liberated of that pressure, of that stress, and been given guidance of how else we can provide around the home. Because ultimately, men want to make their spouses happy. We love our partners. We love them. And if we're
Hopefully,
just,
right? That's why
yeah,
you're
in most
together.
cases,
Like,
yeah.
let's hope.
And like, if we're just told like, it's okay, I make great money, babe. You don't have to shoulder all of the financial burden. Here is what I want. If we're just told that, and some dude like me, like, I need to be told that bluntly and directly, and a lot of guys are like me, it's so helpful, because it gives us the direction we need to know what we need to say and do to make our wives or our partners happy.
And it really gets back to your values, right? As a family, I think it's not that it's being shouldered by one person. It's our responsibility to financially
Right.
provide. It's our responsibility to emotionally provide and to be there for our kids. And how we want to make that work can be really different than, how society says we should, which is my favorite term, don't should on yourself. So every time you
I like that.
say that, right? Like every time you hear something like, oh, well, I should be doing this, or I should be doing that. I should be providing financially for my family. It's like, well, where is that coming from? Is that a decision that I made? So that's my mantra. Don't should on yourself, that I'll
Oh,
leave
that's great.
today. Yes. Okay. So this is a big one. Like we have heard, and you're alluding to this in the conversation, that, women, especially elder millennials and Gen Xers and women who are kind of coming up in their careers, and we have been told through the 90s and early aughts that we could do anything, right? We came up with Sheryl Sandberg and Lean In, and
Yeah.
that message of you can have it all. We definitely can't do it all, but the message was we can have it all. But we really failed, I think, to share in that education to men that you are more than a provider. So how do you see men and women really getting to equity in their relationships in their homes, but also in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, not only have men not been told how we can be providers beyond financial providers throughout the entire education system that we have in this country, but we're actually like looked down upon sometimes for even asking these questions. At least in my generation, like I frankly, up until 3 or 4 years ago, you would never hear the words like gender norms or division of labor. Like these are not vocabulary words that would come from my mouth.
Yeah.
And what's sad is like that it's just so important in a modern world to include this in the vocabulary of not only our formal education system, but informally at home. Like my kids see me doing dishes and cooking. We have conversations about teamwork and they see it. It's evident. And we go out of our way to show them why this is important in our relationship. But when you have men who through the last 20, 30, 40 years have been told your only job is this. And then all of a sudden, the flip side of progress in the workforce is that men are not the breadwinners as frequently. Specifically, in 45% of households now, women earn the same, if not more, right? So on one hand, I look at it, I'm like, okay, economically, this is a human capital issue. So thank God women are starting to advance. And I mean, half of our population has been oppressed. Like, what's that done to our economy? And B, there is the reality that in now 55% of households, women are earning the same or more, and are sorry, that men are experiencing this feeling of, oh my God, I'm not the breadwinner. Am I less of a man? Like
Right.
because they've always been told that's your job. And I
Absolutely.
think like people struggle with that.
Absolutely. So, and I think it starts with, to your point, education, but also with being able to really provide the spaces for men to show up. And it kind of gets back to that conversation you shared earlier with, can leaders parent out loud? Can they give men permission to show up differently at work, to take that leave, to
Yep.
have that time to care for a loved one, a newborn, whatever the case is, and to really say, I trust you and I'm going to keep you. And you don't have to worry about your job. Like you still have an opportunity to grow here. And I think that is a fundamental shift that still really needs to happen.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. So my last question for you is, many of our clients here at Work 360 are high achieving women, executive women. You've been
Mhm.
kind of speaking to our audience very well here, so appreciate that. They want their husbands to step up and do more. They want to see that change. And I think you kind of shared this a little bit of like having that conversation and taking the pressure off, but they feel like they can't seem to get to their husband. So
Yeah.
How did they start that conversation, or what are they missing or doing wrong?
Yeah, and I kind of slipped into my role here. No, that's inaccurate. I slipped into developing Modern Husbands from a Google search. So we moved from Ohio to Georgia in support of her career, right? And then my career here again blossomed, and we had two big jobs. We didn't need more money. We needed flexibility at home. So I just was like, okay, well, it's my turn, right? So I'll be the flexible one, etc. So I just Googled, yes, I Googled how to
I
be a
love
great
it.
husband. That's all I did. I'm like, okay, what do I do? So I read Kate's book, Equal Partners, and
Yeah.
I read Eve's book, Fair Play. And then
Yeah.
like my mind exploded, right? And so for me, married to an executive woman who's a high achiever, like I took the initiative to do it.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case. So my
That's
advice,
rarely the case, to be honest.
yeah,
Mhm.
because we don't, it's not visible like the,
Right. And it's
um,
not available. And it takes this a situation for you to say, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do the research, right? If we're kind of in our, guinea pig like wheels,
yeah,
we're just kind of in it, and it's hard to break away.
I, I think that the best way to handle this would be to schedule, if possible, like a short vacation, like a weekend getaway. If that's
Yeah.
not possible, a Saturday morning when emotion is low, so cognition can be high, and sit down with your husband and say, I really want to talk to you. I look at what we're earning, I look at what I'm earning, and I want to relieve you of feeling like that you're any less of a man because you are not earning as much as me, or that you are liberated from feeling like you have to earn more. We don't need that in our family. We don't need that in our relationship. What's going to make me happy is somebody who provides for me in additional ways, right? And to be very deliberate about it, what those ways are. Like, this is what would make me happy, because he has to be basically given permission to know that he doesn't have to make a bunch of money. He has to be told by his partner, it's okay. I make a bunch of money. We don't need more money. What we need is more time. What we
Mm.
need is less stress in the house. So I would be very direct about that. Know that he is going to have the inherent pressure of feeling like he has to earn. And then after that, start with one thing. So I wrote this down because it's really important. Incremental steps matter a lot. Although,
Yeah.
as I was telling Eve like a few months ago, I think like literally like 2 months of just straight up make the man do everything so he can learn from experience, put his feet in the fire. Like, that's probably best, but it could lead to divorce. I don't know. So I'm not going to suggest that. What I'm going to suggest is one task at a time. So I would suggest that if you are an executive woman married to a man or another woman, that you ask them to do one task that meets the following criteria. One, a significant mental load is required. I think that's the most important, because if you're an executive woman, you need to be relieved of the mental load at home because you have so many responsibilities at work. Number two, it's a task that is addressed regularly. Mowing the lawn is once a week. Doing the
Right.
dishes is 3 times a day,
Every day, totally.
right?
Mhm.
Number three, a task that you hate to do as a
Yep.
like, right? Like, and something that is like, for whatever reason, it drives you nuts. So now you're releasing some of that emotional baggage that comes with managing the home. And number four, a task that is not easy for you to do, right?
Yeah.
So like, I manage the money in our home because that's my skill set. And it's
Yep.
not something that like my wife is naturally great at. So it's like, here you go. And so take away that task. So again, the task should be significant mental load. The task must be something that's done daily.
Yep.
Your partner, like you do not
Yeah.
enjoy the task, and it's not easy. And as you incrementally tackle these tasks again and again and again, please remember that outsourcing is always an option.
Yep.
Always an option. And finally,
Absolutely.
I'm going to always give props to the Fair Play system.
Love it.
Once you get buy-in from your husband with starting with incremental steps, the fair play system is so important because it simplifies the process and creates ownership. That
Yeah.
is such an important, and I know this is a whole separate conversation. I could talk to you for 48 hours about why fair play
Absolutely.
is so beneficial, but please look into using the fair play system in your home.
I love that. And that's absolutely why we teach fair play at work, because it's so critical, I think, for the advancements of both men and women, but particularly women in the workplace, to have that system in their home so they can really offload that invisible labor. And I have to say, I love your criteria, and I think my husband and I might have met it. The first task that he took was daily lunches, packing the lunches. So it
Oh,
was
nice.
definitely daily. It was a huge mental load. It was hard to do because my girls were also super reliant, especially when they were a little younger, on them needing me to help them get ready for the day, and they wanted me. And so trying to do lunches and get them ready was always really a struggle. So definitely was a challenging one. I don't know that he would say it was necessarily his skill set, but he very quickly learned to manage and oversee all of the mental load and all of the execution of the lunches.
A special thanks to our guest and, of course, to all of our listeners. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcast, give us a rating, and share the Modern Husbands podcast with others. Doing so goes a long way in growing our reach. And join your fellow Modern Husbands and have links to our podcasts, articles, and other resources to manage money in the home as a team sent to your inbox every 2 weeks by subscribing to our newsletter at modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.